Hello guys, welcome to another video. Today I'm gonna teach you how bishops move on the chessboard. As you can see on this board, bishop can move just diagonally. So this bishop can move to any of these 13 squares as I'm showing you. If you remember from previous video, rook, when it is in the middle of the board, it can go to 14 squares. As I mentioned in one of the previous videos, in diagonal just we have one color. For example, this bishop can only move in white squares. As you know, each player has two bishops. One bishop which is moving just in white squares, and he has another bishop which is going just in black square. So these two bishops, they can go just in white squares and they cannot go on the black squares. And these two bishops only they can move on black squares and never they can go to white squares. As you can see in this position, this bishop can move to any of the squares I'm showing with green arrows, and it cannot jump over the pieces like rook. So for example, in next move, this bishop can take this knight, or it can go to this square, or it can go to this, for example, square. As you can see in this position, when you have bishop in the corner, the number of squares is reduced to just 7 squares. So it is less than when you have your bishop in the middle of board. But the case for rook is different. As you can see, this rook still can go to 14 squares as I'm showing you. The reason is rook can go to the rank and to the file in the same time, but bishop just can go to the diagonals. For that reason, when you have it in the corner, the number of squares it's reduced to just 7. So for that reason, you have to keep, or you have to bring your bishop in the middle of the board, not in the corners. As you can see in this position, when you have both bishops or a pair of bishops, they can work together much more stronger than when they are alone, because when you have both of them, they can control white and black squares in the same time. As you can see in this position, this bishop with one move can attack both knights. So it can go to d4 square, and from there it can attack both knights in the same time. So from here it can attack both knights in the same time. In this position, if we want to take our bishop to c1 square, at least we need 3 moves, as I can show you. Going to e7 square, and then going to a3 square, and finally going to c1 square. So first of all, we can go to e7 square, and then we can go to a3 square, and finally we can go to a1 square. We have another option as well, but they will take more moves. For example, we can go to f2 square, and then we can go to d4 square, and then we can go to b2 square, and finally we can go to c1 square. But as you can see, it will take 4 moves. In this position, if we want to go by bishop to h8 square, it will take at least 5 moves. So as you can see on the screen. So we can go to f2, and then we can go to b6, and then we can go to d8, and then we can go to f6, and finally we can go to h8. In this position, if we want to take h7 pawn, it will take at least 3 moves, as I show you on the board. So we can go to c4, and then we can go to g8, and finally we can take h7 pawn. In this beautiful position, we want to go to d7 square, but there is a condition. We cannot go to the squares that are controlled by black rooks. So as you know from previous lesson, these 2 black rooks are controlling these squares. And this one controlling these squares. So we want to go to d7 without going to the squares. I'm showing with red arrows. So we cannot go through this way because this point is controlled by this rook, and we cannot go through this way because once again this square is controlling by this rook, and of course we cannot go through this way. This square is controlled by this rook. So the only way that we can go is going back and then going forward and going to this point and finally going to this point. In this position, if you want to go to h8 square, at least it will take 5 moves. So you can go to f2, and then you can go to b6, and then you can go to d8, and then f6, and finally h8. Of course, there is another ways, but it will take more moves. For example, you can go to d2, and then e3, and then b6, and d8, and then f6, and finally h8. But as you can see, it will take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moves. In this position, if you want to go to h1 square, you have to go to a6, c8, d7, e8, h5, f3, and finally to h1. So you will go to a6 first, then c8, and then d7, e8, h5, f3, and finally h1. In this beautiful position, if we want to take a7 pawn, we have to go first g1, e3, c1, a3, c5, and finally we can go to a7. So first we have to go to g1, and then e3, and c1, a3, c5, and finally a7. So this is all about bishop and how it can move on the chessboard. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends. See you in next video.